Okay, good morning, teacher Jimena Calero. Today we are going to present the Guía AP number 1, in which we are going to talk about conceptual framework of planning. Next, please. Okay, so let's get started with the introduction. It is important to mention that in order to obtain good results, it is necessary to plan what will be taught, how it will be taught, and when, and also why. So first of all, lesson planning is a complex process, especially for students and teachers who are not experienced and are still learning. Second, the conceptual framework is a collection of conceptions, presumptions, projections, ideas, evidence, and theories that provides us an understanding of a phenomenon. In this case, the phenomenon is planning. Thus, this report aims to address relevant issues within the conceptual framework of perfect planning. Next, please. Let's start this report by talking about the 20 important elements to develop a perfect planning. The first step is to set the aims. These are simple and general goals that are expected to be achieved in the end. On the other hand, we have the objectives that are similar to aims, but in the way that they specify what you are going to achieve, but they differ in the way that are narrower and more specific. Also, I want to mention that there are two types of objectives. There are the first one is hunting, in which teachers' expectations are clear, and fishing, in which the opposite occurs. Next, please. So let's continue talking about assessment data, which is actually like a feedback. And also in this step, teachers assess the students. It can be both at the beginning of a new year school or at the beginning of each class. Talking about the scope and content, we can say that they give a broad overview of topics that will be addressed. The fifth element is pedagogic methods, in which activities and resources of the lesson are included. And the sixth element for a perfect plan is teacher's expectation, which is basically what the teacher wants to achieve in his students. That means expectation level. And it is important to set the objectives well in order to achieve the teacher's expectations. Next, please. The seventh element is learning activities. And in this case, there is a question that has to be answered in two ways. The first one is the mode of learning, and the second one is the more detailed response in which we can include resources. And it is practically what the students have to do. The number 8 is homework, and it is a task that has to be done at home, and it has to be purposeful and has to also challenge students, but has to be achievable. Let's continue with the differentiation of learning. That is our 9th element. Here we can see that there are different students, as well as there are different learning styles. So the teacher has to include different activities in order to achieve all the students to understand and also learn. And component number 10 is progression in learning. That is actually the progress that students have with respect to the pieces of learning. Let's continue with the next, please. The next is about other curricular links. It is important to work with a cross-curricular link that is actually that one that relates the subjects. Let's continue with number 12, in which we have time. In this case that we are talking about short term, it refers to the hours that it will take to carry out the lesson. Our 13th component is space. That normally is in classroom, and in short term that we actually are talking about is the specific space. And let's not finish yet, but continue with the 14 component that to do a perfect plan, which is resources. And here I want to explain that there are 3 types of resources according to the book. So as you can see in the triangle that we have in the right side of the screen, we can see that the teacher is in the first place. So the teacher is not just a facilitator, but he is also a material, an important material. Then we have the ready-made resources that are actually those that there were not made for this specific purpose, but the teacher decided to include into the lesson. And the last part, we have teacher-produced resources that are those that the teacher designed for this specific lesson. Next, please.
Okay, so now let's continue with the 15th element, that is language. It refers to the use of language skills that are divided into that are receptive and productive. The receptive skills are listening and reading. By the way, productive skills are speaking and writing. So the element number 16 is auxiliary staff, and it's about people who will help in the class or in the learning process. The element number 17 is risk, and it's about any problem that may arise during the class. Then we have the element number 18 that is about assessment. It refers to any activity that the teachers can evaluate, such as projects or group works. Next, we have the element number 19, that is evaluation. They can be taken in different ways, either by evaluating work, tests, exam, or others. And the element number 20 is review procedures. It's about check again what the students learn in the class. So let's continue talking about what is lesson planning. So lesson planning is an essential step in the teaching learning process. It serves as a guide for the teacher to know how to take his class and what steps to follow. Why writing a lesson plan? We need to write a lesson plan because all the teachers must have a detailed process of their class on how to run their class. An important characteristic that lesson plans have is that have an account of students' populations, the books to be used, and above all, the goals to be met by the students. Also, is helpful for students, teachers, observing substitutes, and others. It can be mutable, which means that they adjust according to the class you follow. And finally, the lesson that is going to be given in the class must be relevant for the students. So for doing a lesson plan, we need to answer some questions. The questions are, who exactly are students we will teach? What do we want to do and why? How does it work? What will be needed? What might go wrong? How will it fit in with what come before and after it? And also some authors add some questions. For example, one question is, I'm ready to teach this class.
Now I'm going to talk about why is lesson planning important. So lesson planning is important because it helps teachers be more effective in the classroom by providing a detailed outline to follow each class period. One of the main benefits of lesson plan is organization. This document helps to create a macro view of the course and not only of the separate parts. In this way, teachers are able to think more about the time for each content and also about the order in which each theme will be presented. Also, with a lesson plan, teachers are able to understand which tools and resources are applicable to their material and when to use each of these options. Also, lesson planning produces more unified lessons. It gives teachers the opportunity to think deliberately about their choice of lesson objectives. The lesson planning process allows teachers to evaluate their own knowledge with regard to the content to be taught. Next, next, please. Uh, During the lesson planning process, it's important to take into account the following stages: pre-planning, while planning, and post-planning, which will allow to obtain effective results throughout the learning process. And the first is pre-planning. It helps the teachers to be prepared to answer questions posed by students during class, since planning is the basis for lesson and for education at all levels. So it is necessary to identify the learning objectives, plan the learning activities, assessments, and the sequence of the lesson to start planning. In addition, it is essential to develop a timeline which helps to carry out each of the activities in a chronological and accurate way. On the other hand, we have while planning stage. It refers to the progress of the activities that have been developed and which will be carried out during the learning process. It is important to share the planning with the students during this process, as it will help to keep them more engaged and ready to the class. And finally, we have post-planning, which focuses on the review and synthesis of the topic or lesson, as well as the transfer of learning, which allows linking to the new content with the acquired experiences and knowledge.
Strategies in a lesson planning. Strategies in a lesson planning understand learners' needs effectively during the time related to them. A major and significant strategy is the effectiveness that it produces, as well as the coordinated management of a number of pupils. Good lesson planning is essential to teach and learning process. A guide or teacher who's prepared it has the ability to take the control of the class, including the time and the effort to identify main objectives, a successful lesson, plan address, and integrate the following key process. Objectives for student learning, teaching and learning activities, and strategies to check and understand the students. Next. According to SEN, strategic planning is not just a technical undertaking detailing future objectives to be achieved and actions to be taken. It requires an overall sense of purpose to guide and manage a class in an effective way. Planning strategies are composed as factor and requirement which seeks to implement a good structure in teaching, including educational organizations. So organizations of a lesson plan starts by focusing on implementation and evaluation to foment the optimization of this. By creating a lesson plan, easier to implement through the original predictions. The elaboration of a strategy through commitment and transformational leadership promote that. Learner and intentions are looking for a criterion that helps teachers to ensure plan activities in a way that could be organization field that seeks to obtain strong results at the end of a complementary activity. including management tools to organize a better performance by ensuring to work concretely on aims proposed at the beginning of the class, improving performance and forming a positive environment. Next. To sum up, planning a lesson is extremely necessary as method tool that aims to guide teachers and education in the learning process. A lesson plan is divided in 20 elements, strategies, principles, and benefits that promotes a positive and effective results at the end of the class. It is important to mention some characteristics of a lesson planning so that it may not work as well as you had expected due a number of strange circumstances. Expectations, principles, and providing successful progress and opportunities that continually develop students and the educational community in an effective and commensurate manner. Thank you so much. That was all.